Can call you. Well, to start with, Taoiseach, I want to welcome your willingness to go to Ballymurphy and your support for the families there, and also the notion of putting together an Oireachtas motion. I think that's good. But I have to say, you know, these issues are more serious than to have yourself or indeed Jacques Martin swapping, no matter how serious and genuine they may be, anecdotes about what's happening in the north and the suffering of victims' families. See, of course, the suffering of all of the victims is the same. You know, family of an IRA volunteer, a British soldier, an RUC officer, an UDR officer, but most particularly of a civilian. All of those families feel the same way, and I say that as a family who have buried two family members. One victim of loyalist butchers, young guy coming from a traditional music session, left in the quarry, stabbed to death, and my brother-in-law who was shot to death by the British Army. And I've been shot myself, although I don't see myself as a victim. So I think the government needs to go a wee bit further than what your responses have been, and you know, your focus, and it's a tendency in here all the time to talk about the need for all the parties in the north. It's a refrain from Fianna Fáil and from your government. Need for all of the parties in the north to engage. And you both know, I mean, Jacques Martin knows leadership role played by Martin McGuinness in the north, and you know that as well. And we know that the problem is that the unions, for reasons which I have articulated here in the past, and for reasons which I understand, though I don't accept, are the ones who don't want to engage fully. And you also know that Sinn Féin have signed up for the Haas and Megan O'Sullivan compromise proposals. You also should know that the British government have not. If you want to know why Peter Robinson or Meg Nesbitt haven't, it's because David Cameron hasn't. And we know from our experience in the process that unionist leaders, notwithstanding the support for all of these moves by unionist grassroots, but unionist leaders will only move when a British government lets them know that there's really little other option. And that has not been the case. You know, but my arrest has brought some of these issues into sharp focus, but I've come in here. You know, I've asked for a rational, reasoned debate on the past. I've asked for us to set aside our partisan views, our willingness to score points on a party political basis. When you talk about Ballymurphy, I'm from Ballymurphy. That's where I live. My family home, the home that I'm in, which isn't in the Ballymurphy estate, but is in the townland of Ballymurphy. I'm there nearly every weekend. Most of my family still live there. The people who were killed are my neighbours. So these are real issues for someone like me. And you see, the thing about Ballymurphy is this. The people there look to your government to do something about it, because they know that the British government will not do anything about it. So they look to your government to do something about it. The British Secretary of State made it very, very clear that there was a one-sided approach. This is our view. There's a one-sided approach on deaths in which the state was involved. And she made those remarks recently. So here's a question, Taoiseach. Did your government get notice of these remarks by her? And what did you do when you were told she was going to make this statement? She also dismissed, as you have noted, any notion of an inquiry, as the people of Ballymurphy have asked for, and indeed any notion of an inquiry into the Mont firebombing by the IRA. And again, did your government get notice of it? And what did you do? And if you didn't get notice, why didn't you get notice? Why weren't you told? These are hugely important, very, very significant statements. She also said that just last month about the institutions, that no one can plausibly argue that the institutions must be set in stone for all time. She said that her government would welcome moves that facilitate a more normal system at Stormont that allows for formal opposition. In other words, majority rule. Did you get notice of those remarks? If not, why not? And what was your response? What was the Taoiseach's response? And then we have The Guardian breaking the story about Prime Minister David Cameron hosting the DUP leadership to an engagement in the garden of Downing Street, and The Guardian described this as Mr Cameron playing the orange card, because the suggestion is that he's trying to make sure that following the next election that there's some courtship with the DUP should he depend, as happened with John Major, which famously left to the entire collapse of the process, that there would be unionist votes there for his government. So here you have it, Taoiseach. The British representative in the northern part of this island, northern part of our country, saying that the institutions aren't set in stone, and then saying that there's too much of a focus on killings by the state, and then dismissing a cause which you have given your support for. So what did you do about any of that? The Good Friday Agreement is the people's agreement. Now, maybe your government doesn't have any investment in it, but I would like to think, I guess you voted for it, and I guess Fine Gael and Labour came out in support of it. And under the terms of the agreement, you are the joint guarantor, along with the British government. Now, I have found, and I have worked with more Taoiseach on this matter than anybody else in this Dáil. I have found, with one or two exceptions, that Taoiseach are very deferential to the British, that they behave as junior partners. And okay, you have to raise an issue at a meeting, you have to raise an issue, but where's the strategy? Where's the proactive strategy? What is in place in terms of the recognition now that the process may be in some difficulties? All of these things are very, very predictable. And what it needs is a political and diplomatic defence of the peace process, led by this government. And we're prepared to acknowledge, I mean, the big shift in Sinn Féin, which many historians missed, was when we recognised the responsibility of the Irish government to be in the lead against and with the British government in terms of trying to carve out a peace process. There's a big matter which you noted as well around the 40th anniversary of the Dublin Monaghan bombings, and the British government persistently and consistently rejecting any motion, any appeal, any responsibility that it has to provide information on those matters. Let me come, and I'll conclude in this concordia, back to the issue of victims. See, Irish Republicans have acknowledged many times the hurt caused during the war. And you see, if Choctaw Martin stood up here and said, you know, this is Sinn Féin, he doesn't, but he uses all these little sort of sleeving, sleekit, weasel words. It appears to be Sinn Féin. As far as I can see, it appears to me, as far as I've been able to ascertain. Let me be very, very clear about this. All the victims deserve justice, every single one, and particularly the victims of the Irish Republican Army. I say that as a Republican, because I can't rail against injustices inflicted by the British or others if I'm not taking the same consistent position in terms of those who were bereaved by people whose legitimacy I recognised, and both yourself and the leader of Fianna Fáil recognise the legitimacy of the IRA cause, but in another decade, somewhere you become revisionist in all of this. So I just want to be very, very, very clear that one, it's the right moral thing to do. Two, it's the right peace process thing to do. And three, we understand, because we're from that, I am from that community. That's where I come from. So, having said all of that, we need to straighten these issues out. The peace process cannot be allowed to meander. The road has too many pitfalls. There are too many powerful elements out there on the fringes of nationalism, within unionism, within the British system, who want to derail the process, to build obstacles to it. So the government needs to be seized for all the issues pressing down in your government, and for all the pressing economic issues that impinge upon people's lives every single day. The people of this island and the diaspora and the international community believe in the peace process. So we need to be proactive and preemptive. It's in trouble. Graphically describing the distress of victims will not assist that, although I don't for a moment impinge upon your right to do that. What I want to know is, what's your plan, what's your strategy for holding the British government to account? I'll give you 3 examples by British government which has stepped right outside the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, for which you are a co-guarantor. I've asked you, did you have pre-notice of those remarks? And if not, why not? And what was your response to them? You, Chef.
Thank Deputy Adams for the contribution he's made there. I think everybody can agree that the suffering of all victims is the same, and therefore they deserve justice and the truth to emerge in respect of each of their sad and tragic cases. It is true to say that Sinn Féin have signed up to the Haas talks. That's a fact. It's true to say that other parties have not. Therefore, when 2 parties like this have a disagreement about an issue, the question is, can you bring them closer together where they can both agree on what the fundamentals of that might be? I have to say that when we went round the corner in Windsor, in the little village and town there, on the occasion of the visit of the Uachtaráin, what really did strike me was the streetscape, and their equal status and equal size with the Union Jack was the tricolour on every lamppost, right outside the official residence of Queen Elizabeth, which is a strong signal in its own way. I know that without issuing any plumos for Cancor and Adala, you have done a great deal of work along with Speaker Hay in putting together something that people thought might never happen, to the North-South Parliamentary Dialogue. And I know from reports that where matters were deemed to be not talkable about, that you actually, both of you as respective leaders of this, have brought about a great understanding in so many ways. And that's part of the strategy, Deputy Adams, I suppose, to see can we deal with these issues of past flags and parades. Because, to coin a phrase, they're not going to go away, and it is a case of trying to edge forward. Now, when I spoke to Dr. Haas in New York, he wasn't without hope of being able to resurrect some elements of this, that maybe it might be possible to bring conclusion in some pieces of that. I understand he's coming over to receive the Peace Prize in Tipperary later on, and that he might intend to make some further remarks about this. I recall Deputy Adams being way out in America in 1984, I think it was, after the New Ireland Forum, when all the parties were there, with one exception, and it was Seamus Mallon, actually, who raised the question, said, well, the Sinn Féin party are not here, and who are they? And I recall his words very clearly. He said, well, they're my neighbours down in Market Hill. People you might have to give a hand with a tractor or whatever, as the case might be. And as you say, The people in Ballymurphy are your neighbours, but so also are all the others. Yes, I was informed of the intention of the Secretary of State to issue her statement of not going ahead in respect of an inquiry for Ballymurphy. I was informed of that, Deputy Adams. I think it was late the night before, to be honest with you, and I didn't have a copy of the statement. One of the senior officials in the Department of the Taoiseach informed me that they had been told and related to them that the Secretary of State intended to issue that statement. It may well be that some more detail might have been made available to the Department of Foreign Affairs. I know that the Secretary of State is in pretty regular contact about these issues with the Taoiseach as Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I can't confirm that to you now. We can check that later. There's nothing to stop the Prime Minister hosting occasions in the gardens of Downing Street for groups or for people that he might want. If you say it's political about dealing with the unionist parties, sure. I mean, they were talking down here about yourself and Deputy Martin getting together at one stage, and I don't suppose it was just for discussions, but that's neither here nor there, not for me to comment. I hope that the institutions are not set in stone, because if they're not set in stone, then there's the possibility of change, and if there's a possibility of change of heart or whatever, then some of these issues that are there as issues of the past might be able to be moved forward and dealt with. It is the People's Agreement, it is the Good Friday Agreement, and all parties here, and I would say to you that all parties, in fairness to them, made their contribution over the years in some small way towards the production and the process of the Good Friday Agreement becoming a reality, irrespective of what Taoiseach stood here, or what party they represented. In their own way, they made some element of progress, maybe not as much as people might have liked at the time, but individually and collectively, the Oireachtas and the governments here were amenable to moving the situation in Northern Ireland to a point where we could get agreement. And yes, I know that the Sinn Féin party did say that here's a big change when governments are in the lead. And of course it's a true statement of historic fact that the people in a different decade and now a different century did support the campaign, but it had the legitimacy of the people's endorsement. It's a very different matter than what was the subject of the so-called war by the IRA, which did not have the legitimacy and the backing of the people, and which resulted in both soldiers and members of the Gardaí and innocent civilians down here being blown asunder as well. So you're not coming from the same base in making that particular point. The peace process cannot be allowed to be static. Nor can we have a situation where a blockage of politics disallows the next generation to move outside that and to move on ahead. And that's why I'm happy to say that, I was in Donegal yesterday. We looked at the question of the peace bridge as being symbolic of the new movement ahead here. The 15 million development both in Derry Institute of Technology and Letterkenny Institute of Technology, new science collaboration, 50,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet. That's the future, and that's why I say that in the case of Derry is a very progressive, forward-thinking outlook from the people. I also like to think that the engagement that is going on genuinely between ministers on a very regular basis is productive and is part of, if you like, the process of people being able to work together on a whole range of issues that are in the interests of North and South, our peoples and our economies. It's the politics of this are the issue. And genuinely I'm willing to listen to valid suggestions here as to how, when this current electoral process is over here, how we might be able to possibly move forward again in respect of the three issues that Dr. Haas was dealing with. But it's not for the co-guarantors, either the government here or the British government, to say to the parties in Northern Ireland, you are the elected representatives of the people and now you must do this, because that won't work either. And if both governments were to lead something into a situation where it goes on interminably, that's not satisfactory either. So, I mean, President Clinton did say it very clearly. I was here 20 years ago, he said, and we put this peace process together. Now you must finish the job. On behalf of the government here, Deputy Adams, let me say that we are more than willing to support the initiatives of the parties. And I do take it that you have signed up for the Haas talks. You might differ in other opinions with the other parties. But at the end of the day, as I see it in Europe on a regular basis, where there are disagreements on other matters, compromise and agreement on fundamentals is what makes the difference. Now, Deputy Martin might want to ask you another question there.
Deputy Martin.
And I just want to make some very straight remarks, and not weasel words or anything like that. One of the questions I put to Taoiseach was, and obviously the past is a very key issue. What's going on right now in relation to the past is, in my view, reprehensible. And it's a hate campaign that has developed in relation to those who have been involved in the Boston tape exercise. Now, those who were involved in that and those who did the taping and those who contributed to tapes genuinely believed it would not be released until after they were dead. Okay? Now, Sinn Féin has an issue with that, and others have an issue with it. But it's unacceptable that on the front page of a Sunday World you read, Boston tout, Ivor Bell is under pressure to come clean in relation to the contents of the controversial Boston tapes. There's graffiti now on the walls in the north about the touts, the informers, the greed. The salaries of those who are actually doing the interviews is out, as if it represents some astronomical amount of money, and that was all for greed. And comparisons are being made between those who were involved in the project and those who cracked under pressure in Castlereagh and became informers and who were dealt with by the then IRA. Now you get good cop, bad cop all the time. And on the one hand you get the nice presentation. But on the other hand, this is going on right now. And I've been contacted about it, Taoiseach, in relation to it. People are worried now about their lives. People are worried about the security aspect to it. And it should be condemned, and Sinn Féin should make sure that anybody involved, anyone associated with them involved in this, should stop and should cease, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient it is. And the leader of Sinn Féin will accuse others of revisionism, Taoiseach, but I want to put it to you, Taoiseach, that it is absurd revisionism to suggest that there was any just war going on over those 30-odd years, from 74. I meet many ex-combatants who say there was no justification now in retrospect for anything that went on after Sunningdale. There was no great war. There was a war on terror, and people were killed who didn't need to be killed for far too long. It went on for years and years and years. And now we're all being sort of cozy to accept kind of language around conflict and war and the sides and all of that. There was too many appalling atrocities carried out that cannot be justified in any shape or form. And I would make the point to you, Taoiseach, the peace process does belong to the Irish people. It doesn't belong to you, me, or indeed the Sinn Féin party either. Yet, when somebody gets arrested, that the Sinn Féin party don't like getting arrested, they'll organise protests outside the policing station, which they did in relation to one prominent arrest of one of their members in relation to the McCartney murder. 300 people turn up outside the policing station with a member of the policing board, Gerry Kelly, saying this is an outrage. So when they want to threaten the peace process, they'll do it. And the same happened in the last number of weeks, because they didn't like a particular arrest. Oh, the peace process is now under threat. Policing support is under threat. So you can't have it both ways. You either support it or you don't. And you can't just switch up and switch off and switch down the temperature when it suits. And the temperature was switched up deliberately 2 weeks ago. Let no one be under any doubt or illusion about that. And the mask slipped for a few days, but it slipped deliberately. And the word to the authorities was this: keep going and you won't have a peace process. Keep going and you will not have support for policing in Northern Ireland. And I just want to make the final point I put to you, Taoiseach, that would you have concerns, and I know this, that any victims of Republican paramilitary violence in unsolved cases, actually have a belief, and I'm not talking about recent cases, I'm talking about other cases. They actually believe they'll never be solved. Because you know why, Taoiseach? They believe it would be too politically inconvenient to solve them and to bring people to justice in relation to them. That may be true, it may not be true. But that is the view of quite a number of victims.
Sorry, Deputy, I just have to...
They actually think this will never, some of those cases will never actually be properly dealt with by the authorities because it would be too politically inconvenient to do so.
Deputy Adams.
Concordia, just very briefly, Concordia, and I want to come back to the Taoiseach's remarks. You see, no one involved with Sinn Féin is engaged in the graffiti or the wall daubing or the perceived threats or real threats against anyone. That's very, 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 very clear. And I condemn these threats, and I think everyone, I've said it but more times than enough, that people need to be able to go about their business without any fear of any threat whatsoever. And the Haas, for the information of Teachta Martin, the Haas proposals include the right of families, if they wish, to seek legal redress. So Sinn Féin supports that concept. What we have to understand here is there are multiple narratives. In the same way as there's the Fine Gael narrative, the Labour narrative, the Fianna Fáil narrative, there is, in more recent times, a Sinn Féin narrative and a Republican narrative. There's a Unionist narrative, there's a British Army narrative, there's an IRA narrative. And we would get a bit of sense of our history if we were able to lay all of those narratives side by side, as opposed to undermining any of them. And for the record, no generation of the IRA had a mandate. Not in 1916, not during the Tan War, not during the Civil War, or since. But every generation of the IRA had sufficient endorsement of enough people to continue, including in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, until thankfully the war was brought to a close. Now, when the Uachtarán's visit to Britain was taking place, and I welcomed that, and we know that Martin McGuinness played a key role in that also, I said to you here, we need peace on the streets as well as in the big houses. And I repeat that here today. And I agree with you, Taoiseach, that all governments have played their role in terms of this ongoing peace process. I acknowledge that, and I've done so, and I commend them all. Now, you say in response to my question, yes, you were given notice, but you didn't have the detail of what Secretary of State Villiers was going to say, but perhaps someone in the Department of Foreign Affairs may have it. Could I ask you, was your government given notice of my arrest? Could I ask you that as well? And can I ask you to revisit your response to my question about were you given notice about what the British Secretary of State was going to say? Because I think that and your response to it shows where the government is failing. And I say that in the most fraternal, positive way possible, because I want this peace process to work, and I'll do everything possible to make sure that this peace process works. So I ask you to reflect on what I have said, and was your government given notice of my arrest?
Taoiseach. In respect of the notice from the Secretary of State, as I said to you, I know I was informed myself late in the evening that it was the intention to issue a statement not approving of an investigation into Ballymurphy. I'll have to check with Deputy Adams to see whether the copy of the statement was submitted either to the Department of Foreign Affairs or the Department of the Taoiseach. I first learned of your arrest because you answered questions here. Sorry, you asked questions. You were going off to answer questions. You asked questions here on the Wednesday, and I was in the House, I think, myself for quite some time. And on my way out of here, somebody stopped me in the corridor over there and said that an arrest had taken place. Obviously, that was the first I heard of it, so I can't confirm to you whether notice was received. I don't think it was, but I'll advise Deputy on that. I might say that at least we now know that the IRA have gone. We know that the Army Council is disbanded. We know that there was no just war here. Now, I spoke to Deputy First Minister Martin McGuinness on the telephone on the Saturday when you were in custody, And I said to him, you know, Martin, if the position is that you believe that there's a cabal operating within the PSNI and that this is the dark side of the PSNI, I chair a committee down here which is to put in place a statutory independent authority for the Garda Síochána as following a government decision. And one of the issues that's always held out is that you should look at the question of how the thing is structured in Northern Ireland, that there's an oversight and an overseeing responsibility for the Ombudsman there. And I suggested to the Deputy First Minister that if it's his belief, as he said himself, being told to him by very senior personnel within the PSNI, that there is a dark side and there is a cabal operating in there, that the test of the authenticity of the oversight review is vested then in the Ombudsman's office, and that he should make a formal complaint. I'm not sure that the Deputy First Minister wants to do that, but if there is an issue there, then that's where the oversight review is lodged. And I have to say that when I saw the people presenting and preparing the mural of Deputy Adams in Belfast, which is their right, there were comments made there by some people to the effect that we have not gone away. Now, who are the we? And who are they referring to when they say we have not gone away? These clearly are supporters of Sinn Féin, but I'm not sure what interpretation to put on that. So I would hope that we can move it forward. Certainly, let me assure you that from the point of view of government, there's certainly no lack of interest here, and both governments will be very happy to cooperate and work with and encourage the parties if we can see that there's an opportunity to move any of these issues forward to a point where you can have a better outcome. Nobody wants to see a return to what went on before. Nobody wants to see Gardaí having to evacuate innocent people with a live bomb and a timer here in the Republic or anywhere else. We want to leave those days behind us, and it behoves everybody to so do. So I just want to repeat that account, Corla. So with the agreement of the other leaders, I'll frame a motion for their consideration in respect of Ballymurphy in the next while.
Thank you, Taoiseach.